Hello, everyone. This is Father Damaskinos Isa, and I'm continuing the reading and the Good Samaritan at Children's Catechism. So, after Father Luke started with the introduction, I'm going today to continue and read lesson 1 about paradise, our one big church. In our introduction, we painted the big picture of how God has rescued us from the sickness of sin. We read the parable of the Good Samaritan from the Gospel of St. Luke. It tells us the whole story of our lives and God's love for us. We heard about a certain man who traveled down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Who does this man represent? He is Adam, the first man, who fell from the life of grace and paradise down into a world of sin. What was paradise? It was the beautiful and the blessed place God created for Adam and Eve and their children to live with Him forever. And because Adam sinned, his heart was opened up to the robbers, the demons, who want to rob us of the light of God. Man was left half dead because his soul was now sick and deadened by sin. And who saw the poor half-dead man but did not stop to help? The priest, the Levite, from the Old Testament time before Jesus. They couldn't cure the man because only God could bring him back to health. And so God sent the Good Samaritan. Who is the Good Samaritan? It is Jesus Christ, God's only Son. He became man to heal us and lift us back to God. Jesus is both God and man. It's like God put us on His shoulders as He could raise us back to paradise. God created our hearts to reach up to Him, to live in paradise with Him forever. But sadly, instead of reaching up to God, Adam and Eve looked downward and they sinned. That left them in a place of sickness and suffering and death. And all of creation suffered too. Animals and plants died, now too because of man's sins. One big church. So how did Adam and Eve before they sinned? And where? What was it like? The saints of the church have given us the answers to these questions because by God's grace they were made worthy to see paradise with their spiritual eyes, and some even visited there. God created everything from nothing, before there was something even. What was there? Nothing. There was absolutely nothing except for God. The three divine persons of the Holy Trinity, God the Father, His Son, and His Spirit. Then when God decided to create the world from His overflowing love, He spoke and suddenly everything came to be. First light, then the sky, the outer space, the land, the seas, the grass, plants, trees, sun and moon, for the day and for the night, then birds and fish and animals of all kinds. And God saw that everything He made was good, as we read in Genesis 1:25. Creation was filled with His goodness, with His light, with His life. Then God created His most marvelous creature, the human being, man and a woman. Are you human? Are we just checking? First, He created Adam. He took dust and then breathed into it to make Adam the first man. What did He breathe into the dust to make a man a living being? The Holy Spirit. We are alive because of the Holy Spirit. If we don't have God's Spirit in us, we are not really and truly alive as God made us. Just after God created Adam, he put him in a special place of joy, paradise, in a beautiful garden called Eden. What was paradise like? It was much more beautiful than any place on earth today. Listen as I try to describe what paradise was like. The ground was likely covered with a beautiful carpet of soft, silky green grass. Perhaps Adam could take a nap by rolling up the grass like it was a soft mattress or blanket. The trees were full of delicious fruit all year round. Leaves never turned brown, and fruit never rotted. Adam and Eve were never hungry in the way we are today, with a feeling of emptiness and pain. But when they ate, they were filled with joy, and it made them hunger even more for God. Their throats were never dry and thirst, but when they drank, it felt like the Holy Spirit was being poured into their bellies. Rivers and lakes were clear and pure like liquid crystal, and there was no pollution. In the Garden of Paradise, the air was completely pure and sweet, and breathing made one remember the Lord, kind of like church incense does. The weather was always beautiful, and paradise was never too hot or too cold. There were no tornadoes or hurricanes or thunderstorms that could scare or hurt any living thing. So Adam and Eve did not need a house to live in or even clothing to protect them from the elements. God gave Adam and Eve dominion and power over everything, even nature. That means they could probably ask the wind to blow harder so they could fly a kite or dry themselves off after a swim. They could ask the sun not to go down until later in the evening so they could finish playing soccer. They did not wear clothing, not just because it was not cold, but because they had a different kind of clothing. They were wrapped in light, God's own light. Do you remember when Jesus was transfigured on Mount Tabor? Remember how the disciples could hardly look at him because he was shining with such a light. That's the light that covered Adam and Eve. In paradise, there was no sickness, no death. Adam and Eve never caught a cold or got the flu. They never broke a leg or bruised a knee. They never got sick, weak, or old. Also, before sin, Adam and Eve's bodies were beautiful, light, and strong. In paradise, they could run forever without getting tired. They could run up a mountain as fast as they could run down. And if they fell, they did not get hurt. There was no pain in paradise. They did not need to sleep. They did not have to take naps. But if they did rest, it was a wonderful, peaceful time to spend with God. Their bed was God's grace. Their blanket was God's love. And their pillow was God's peace. In paradise, the animals were handsome, strong, and gentle. Do you think the animal talked? Adam and Eve were not afraid of them, nor were the animals afraid of Adam and Eve, but they helped them and loved them. The wild bears, the lions, were man's friends, just as Saint Seraphim of Seraph had a wild bear for his friend, and as friendly lion dug a grave for Saint Mary of Egypt. The saint's holiness allowed them to live as if they were back in paradise. Paradise was not just a place outside that Adam and Eve could see and touch. It was also how God lived in their hearts. Paradise was also inside Adam and Eve, because God lived in them and spoke to their hearts. They could hear the voice of God and felt they could almost see and touch Him. They tasted Him when they ate. God gave them the tree of life. This tree was like Holy Communion today, and they could have eaten of it eventually if they had remained in paradise. Adam and Eve walked with God in the garden, and they often saw the angels praising God and helping with creation. Maybe they saw their own guardian angels. In paradise, prayer poured out of the hearts of Adam and Eve continually, like a beautiful song. This is what it means to be healthy, as God created us to have never-ending prayer coming out of our hearts. But the first man and woman were not completely perfect or grown up yet. God created them in His image, but He wanted them to grow up into His likeness. They were like children, and they still had to learn and grow a lot before they could be even closer to God and become more and more like Him. God, the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, created both man and woman in His image and in His likeness. His image means that we were made according to the model of or mold of His Son. It's as if we have an icon of Jesus stamped on our hearts. The icon can never destroy, but it can be covered over and darkened by sins. His likeness means that we can grow to become more and more like God forever and ever. This life of spiritual growth in paradise is how God desired us to live forever. He made us to have great dignity, like good and caring rulers. He made man and woman to be king and queen over creation, to take good care of it, and to bring God more and more into themselves and into all creation. Adam and Eve were like priests. They lifted up their hearts in thankfulness to God for all that He gave them, just as the priest and all the people of the church offer up to God the bread and the wine at the Divine Liturgy. Do you remember in the Divine Liturgy when the priest lifts up his hands and extends an invitation to us? Let us lift up our hearts. Let us give thanks unto the Lord. This is an invitation to be like Adam and Eve in paradise, to do what they failed to do. Did you know that in the Divine Liturgy we experience paradise for a little while? Do you experience it? Or do you just feel bored and tired? Paradise, the place where God put Adam and Eve, was like the church, heaven on earth. But God did not want paradise to be a small place, or just for few people. He wanted us to make the whole world paradise. He wanted us to help make the whole world a church, one big church where people live with God and God with them. But Adam and Eve only lived in paradise for a short while. God gave them the ability to make choices. He wanted them to love Him, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. He allowed them to make the choice to reject him and turn away from truth and life. That choice is called sin. Next, we will explain what happened when Adam and Eve sinned. Like the man in the parable of the Good Samaritan, they went down from Jerusalem, paradise, to Jericho, sin.